The temptation to intolerance is nothing new. In our own age, it is certainly more visible. Through various forms of the media, we are exposed to racial hatred, political violence, and religious bigotry, to name but a few. Some cable television outlets provide airtime for various groups which advocate hatred and division. I think you know who I'm talking about. CNN, Fox News, liberals, conservatives, moderates, you name it. But the temptation to intolerance is found also in our readings today, especially one of the parables told by Jesus in Matthew's Gospel. An enemy plants some weeds in the wheat fields of a man. The wheat and the weeds grow up together. What is one to do? The most obvious suggestion is made to the landowner. Go out and pull them up. Pull them up. One way to remove weeds is to go directly and attack the problem. Get those weeds out of here. They do not belong there. The weeds are ruining the wheat. After all, the wheat has rights too. If something is not done and done quickly, the evil will only grow. In addition, what will others think if we do not act right away to rid ourselves of these weeds? The neighbors will think we are soft on weeds. Worse, the enemy will think the landowner is weak. This will only invite him to plant more weeds. No, the situation calls for immediate drastic action. Jesus counsels another way, the way of patience and hope. Granted, such an approach is not popular, but it's the most godlike way of living in the world. Jesus is not interested in immediate results, you know, the quick fix. There is great wisdom in the time and the ability to patiently wait and hope. This is never easy. Never. For to wait and hope often strikes others and even ourselves as being passive, being laid back, or downright irresponsible. Do something is the categorized imperative of the unthinking. For to compulsively do something without asking the deeper question of means and goals and intentions is to be part of the problem rather than the solution. Terrorists seldom ask the moral questions of means and goals. The technician in the biology lab making new life forms is never troubled about such silly concerns as the ethical and moral implications of what is being done. And the list goes on and on and on, but the denominator is common: doing something. The landowner in our gospel knows that if the weeds are pulled up, the wheat will follow as well. The enemy will have succeeded. Rashness is often foolishness. Patience is not weakness, but it is wisdom. We need to consider. Let me say that again. We need to consider the weeds in our own lives. Who are those people and those groups we find so dangerous, so repulsive, and fill us with a strong desire to reach down and pull them up? If we are conservative, we find liberals a danger to all that is moral and traditional. If we are liberals, we find the conservatives to be backward and oppressive. Each person can plug his or her own in-group and out-group. The trouble with such grouping and intolerance is that each person finds himself as part of one group which is in and part of a group which is out. The lines of division grow, intolerance increases, hatred and violence become the normal and expected way of responding to those who are different. The weeds, the out-group, must be pulled up. The book of wisdom is not misnamed. We are reminded that our goal is caring, that we are to be like our God, lenient, be understanding, be compassionate, and for God wants us to do to one another as He continually and constantly does for us. The tolerant and patient deeds of God are shown in hopes that we too might be individuals and communities of such deeds. The responsorial psalm says it so beautifully. Lord, you are good and forgiving. The gift of Jesus shows us just how good and forgiving we should be. Each day we encounter those whom we consider to be weeds. And at times we are considered to be the weeds in others' lives. What to do? Be strong enough to be tolerant. Like God, be strong enough to love and to forgive. Some people are so disgusted with the fault, so disgusted with the sins, and so disgusted with the corruption they see in the church that they resort to extreme solutions. Either they leave the church or they want to drive out the sinners. They cannot stand weeds among the wheat in their own church. But I'm here to tell you today, sometimes that weed belongs to a wheat. And sometimes that wheat belongs to a weed. So be careful who you pluck up from the church. Be careful who you try and drive out. For the wheat and the weed sometimes grow up together. For it is at the end, in the end days and times, that the master will separate the wheat from the weeds. You know, Joan of Arc faced some pretty tough weeds in the church of her day. Responding to a call from God to help in the 100-Year War, the curse of the 14th century, Joan became the commander of the French forces. Joan of Arc was 17 years old. Joan of Arc was a teenager. We have some Joan of Arcs in Fatima that received divine messages. And church, maybe we should listen to them more attentively. In the time that she won battles, she just dressed up in this white armor, got on her steed and led the French armies into battles, and she won time in and time out. Because she was not only called, but she was sent by God. In time, she was captured by the English and put on trial as a heretic, put on trial as a witch. Because how could a 17-year-old girl lead a group of men into battle and be victorious? They intimidated her. They asked her to swear on the Gospels that she would speak nothing but the truth. She responded. She said, I don't know what you might ask me. Perhaps you will ask me things that I don't want to tell you. But an inquisitor threatened her with the question, do you think you are in the state of grace? Joan, the 19-year-old by this time, after being in battle for 2 years, replied with the subtlety of a theologian. She said, if I am not May God put me there. But if I am, may God keep me there. She shot these remarks at the weeds, a court composed of 1 cardinal, 6 bishops, 32 doctors of theology, 16 bachelors of theology, 7 doctors of medicine, and 103 accusers. Joan should have just gone and got some weed, be gone, and sprayed it. Frustrated these folk were. They reminded her that they were the church. Weeds be gone. Joan blazed at them as though they were a bunch of roosters at sunrise in her farmyard. She looked beyond them to the truth of the matter. To me, the church is where Christ is. There can be no contradiction between Christ and his church. My brothers and sisters, they burned a 19-year-old girl at the stake. Not because they were afraid of her because of her victorious and gallant mission sent by God into battle. Not because she was a heretic or a witch, because of her impudent remarks to a bunch of weeds, burned her to death. 25 years later, a church court reversed this judgment about her presumed heresy. In 1920, she was canonized, a saint, and made the patroness of France. Now, Joan understood there were weeds with the wheat in the church. It was not a perfect church. She was comfortable with that despite the suffering that it caused her. She made her insight the road to sanctity. We have a church that has saints and sinners and everybody in between. Our church is not an elitist band of angels, nor a wretched company of the damned. We have chaos amid our cosmos. We do try to stamp out sin and evil, but in doing so, we must not destroy the church itself. The sinners among us can become saints. The saints among us can become holy. No one is a fixed state this side of paradise. The sinners need our forgiveness, and the saints our admiration for the resolve to change. The French have a saying, to understand everything is to forgive everything. We are called to appreciate the whole picture of the church that is composed of people on a journey. Some are racing toward God, some are racing away from God. Others are just muddling their way through. The drama and adventure of being Catholic is to walk this journey with poise, to walk this journey with elegance, to walk this journey with sympathy, to walk this journey with understanding. When we feel the impulse to suppress the sinner, it is time to look into our own hearts and find out why we are being so zealous. It is time to ask ourselves, where is our gift of loving forgiveness? Where is the heart that reaches out with empathy to heal our brothers and sisters? Where is our inner resource that blocks unseemly judgmentalism? You know, fanatics are like forest fires. They burn brightly, but destroy all that is tender and green. To be useful, fire must be confined. For the passion for goodness must be linked to the compassion for people. This is the best way to handle those weeds we see in the wheat of the church. If we had to guess what we have and why we have such a fascination with sins and failing of others, I would probably argue that it is because by doing so, we exalt ourselves. It simply allows us to see ourselves and our imperfections in a more favorable light. You see, when we recognize immorality in others, our immorality does not look so bad. When other people make bad choices, our mistakes do not seem so problematic. When those around us blatantly break God's laws, we start to feel a little more faithful. And when they show us a few of the weeds in their lives, we begin feeling more and more like the wheat. I am sure I do not have to tell you the inherent danger of feeling that way. Spiritually, it is a trap. It allures us into a false sense of security, a spiritual place in which we have little to improve upon, little to change, little to surrender to God's mercy. In that scenario, the problems and brokenness of the world are the result of others failing, not mine. If only they would change, things would be a whole lot different. Now that we should turn a blind eye to all that needs to change in the hearts of men and women, but it has to start with ourselves. How can I be more faithful? How can I continue to carry out the mission of Jesus? How can I be a reconciler? How can I be a healer? How can I be a giver? How can I be a lover? If we really think about it, life is not as clear-cut as the story suggests. All of us at times are channels of God's grace. Therefore, we are the wheat. And at other times, we are capable of turning our backs on God and are therefore the weeds. Our story is ever-changing through the mercy of God, who forgives us continually and allows us a fresh start, a clean slate, as often as we need. I guess you could say that in a certain sense, weeds, wheat, grow side by side in the human heart. And all we can do is, like the workers in the story, acknowledge that the weeds exist, bring them to the master's attention, and allow the master to separate them from all that is good and holy within us. This radical purification and transformation is a precious gift offered to us continually by the one who died for us so that we might live. There are some things in this life which we should be wise enough to simply leave to God. Only God can judge. Only God can cleanse. And only God can save. My brothers and sisters, this day, let us remember to always be as understanding as possible with others, resisting the temptation to pretend that we know how God sees them. Instead, let us recognize our own profound need for God's mercy, acknowledging that too often we allow the wrong kind of seed to grow in our lives and in our hearts. Weeds, good, bad, holy, unfaithful. God, I think I'll let you sort it all out and heal us as you see fit. You are clearly the only one that seems to know what you're doing.